Sarah Chen looked at the message on her screen for the 5th time. She still could not believe what she was reading. The Galactic Council wanted her to come to their emergency meeting. In 300 years, no human had ever been invited to such a meeting. She walked to the window of her office on Nexus Prime Station. Outside, she could see ships from dozens of different alien species floating in space. Some looked like giant crystals. Others were made of metal that seemed to flow like water. A few ships glowed with their own light. Sarah had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for 10 years, but she still found the sight amazing. The door chimed, and her assistant Marcus walked in. He was a young man with worried eyes and messy brown hair. "Ambassador Chen, the Council wants you there in 2 hours. Should I prepare the usual diplomatic files?" Sarah shook her head. "I don't think the usual files will help with this one." She picked up the message pad again. "Do you know anything about the war between the Zephyrians and the Crystallines?" Marcus nodded. "It's been going on for 6 months now. They're fighting over some mining colonies in the outer spiral. The news says thousands are dying every day. And the Council's peacekeepers can't stop it. They've tried everything. Talks, trade blocks, even sending in their best military units. Nothing works." Marcus paused. "Why are they asking for you? I thought humans weren't allowed to get involved in wars." Sarah had wondered the same thing. For 3 centuries, humanity had been banned from all galactic conflicts. The official reason was that humans were too violent and could not be trusted. Every human child learned this in school. It was just a fact of life, like gravity or the speed of light. But Sarah had always wondered if there was more to the story. Sometimes, when she talked to older aliens, she saw something strange in their eyes when humans were mentioned. It wasn't anger or disgust. It was fear. 2 hours later, Sarah stood outside the great doors of the council chamber. The doors were made from a single piece of black stone that came from a planet where time moved differently. Looking at them always made her feel dizzy. The doors opened with a sound like thunder. Inside, the chamber was filled with aliens of every shape and size. Some floated in the air. Others sat on chairs made of living wood. A few existed only as patterns of light and sound. At the center of the chamber stood Council Prime Zerion. He was older than human civilization. His species had been solving galactic problems since before Earth's sun was born. He looked like a tree made of silver, with branches that moved like arms and leaves that changed color with his mood. Right now, those leaves were deep red, which meant he was very worried. "Ambassador Chen," Zerion's voice sounded like wind through a forest. "Thank you for coming." Sarah bowed in the human way. "Council Prime, it is an honor to be here. Though I must admit I'm surprised by the invitation." "Yes, I imagine you are." Zerion's leaves turned darker. "We face a crisis unlike any we have seen in 1,000 years. The war between the Zephyrians and Crystallines grows worse each day. Our usual methods have failed." A Zephyrian delegate stood up. The Zephyrians looked like birds made of metal, with wings that sparkled in the light. "Council Prime, surely you do not mean to suggest what I think you are suggesting." "I suggest nothing yet," Zerion replied. "I simply state facts. Our peacekeepers cannot end this war. Economic pressure has failed. Military intervention has only made things worse." On the other side of the chamber, a crystalline representative rose. The crystallines were living gemstones that spoke by making their bodies ring like bells. When this one spoke, it sounded like a song. "The Council cannot be considering lifting the human ban. The risks are too great." "What risks?" Sarah asked. All eyes turned to her. She felt very small in the huge chamber, but she kept her voice steady. "My people have followed the ban for 300 years. We have caused no trouble. We trade fairly and share our science freely. What exactly are you afraid of?" Silence filled the chamber. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat. Finally, Zerion spoke. "It is not your violence we fear, Ambassador Chen." "Then what?" Zerion's leaves turned yellow, which meant he was thinking hard. "That is a discussion for another time. For now, we must focus on the current crisis." A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. It belonged to an ancient being that looked like a cloud of stars. "The humans fought in the Void War. They know what real war looks like." "That was different," the Zephyrian delegate said quickly. "The Nixari Empire threatened the entire galaxy. We had no choice but to use every resource available. And look what happened," the crystalline added. "The war ended, yes. But at what cost?" Sarah frowned. She knew about the Void War from history books. The Nixari Empire had weapons that could age entire solar systems to death in hours. Every species in the galaxy had joined together to fight them. Humanity had been part of that alliance and had helped win the war. But the history book said it was a team effort. They never mentioned any special cost. I don't understand, Sarah said. The Void War was won. The galaxy was saved. Isn't that what matters? The chamber fell silent again. This time the silence felt different. It felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Zarian's leaves turned deep blue, which meant he was sad. Ambassador Chen, there are things about that war that were never made public. Things that led to the decision to ban human involvement in future conflicts. What things? The real question, said the cloud of stars, is whether those things matter more than ending the current war. Sarah looked around the chamber. Every alien present was staring at her, and she could see that fear again in their eyes. But now she could also see something else. Hope. Council Prime, Sarah said carefully. Are you asking if humanity would be willing to help end the war between the Zephyrians and Crystallines? I am asking if you would be willing to hear our proposal. Sarah thought about the thousands of beings dying every day in the outer spiral. She thought about the families torn apart by war and the children who would grow up without parents. She also thought about the fear in the aliens' eyes and the secrets they were keeping about the Void War. I will listen, she said, but I want to know the truth about why humans were really banned. Zarian's leaves turned silver, which meant he was making a difficult decision. Very well, but understand that some truths are dangerous. Ambassador Chen, some truths change everything. I'm ready for that, Sarah said, though she wasn't sure if she meant it. As the chamber began to empty, Sarah noticed that many of the aliens were talking in quiet groups. Some looked excited. Others looked terrified. A few looked resigned, as if they had known this day would come. Walking back to her office, Sarah felt like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. Behind her was everything she had known and understood about humanity's place in the galaxy. Ahead was a truth that might change everything. She just had to decide if she was brave enough to jump. Sarah couldn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the fear in the aliens' faces and heard Zarian's warning about dangerous truths. She got up from her bed and made coffee, then sat at her desk and started researching. The public records about the Void War were easy to find. Sarah had read them many times before. The Nexari Empire had started the war by attacking the peaceful Andromedans. Their entropy weapons could make stars grow old and die in minutes. They conquered half the galaxy before anyone could stop them. The war lasted 50 years. Many species fought bravely, but nothing seemed to work against the entropy weapons. Then humanity joined the fight, and somehow everything changed. The official record said it was a team effort that finally defeated the Nexari. The war ended when the Nexari Empire surrendered completely. But the records didn't explain why the Nexari had surrendered. They had been winning for 50 years. What could have changed so quickly? Sarah decided she needed to dig deeper. She used her diplomatic codes to access the restricted council archives. Most of the files were still blocked, but she found some interesting pieces. The first thing she noticed was a communication from the Nexari Emperor, sent 3 days before the surrender. It was addressed to the Galactic Council, and it said, "We formally request that humanity be removed from this conflict immediately. We are prepared to discuss terms." That was strange. Why would the winning side ask for one specific species to be removed? Sarah found another file, this one from a council meeting held right after the war. The title was Emergency Session: The Human Problem. The file was heavily censored, but she could read a few lines. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that threaten the fundamental order of galactic society. Council Prime recommends immediate restrictions on human military involvement. All species agree that the precedent set by human actions during the war must never be repeated. Sarah leaned back in her chair. What had humans done during the war that was so scary? She decided to look at Earth's own records. The next morning, Sarah sent a secure message to Dr. Elena Vasquez at the Earth Historical Archive. Elena was an old friend from university, and she specialized in military history. The reply came back within hours. "Sarah, what you're asking about is classified at the highest levels, but I've attached what I can send. Meet me on Earth if you want to know more." The attached file made Sarah's hands shake as she read it. It was a report written by Dr. James Morrison, a physicist who had worked with the military during the Void War. The Report was titled Theoretical Reversal of Entropy-Based Weapon Systems. Sarah read the report 3 times before she understood what it was saying. Dr. Morrison hadn't just figured out how to defend against the Nexari weapons. He had figured out how to reverse them. The entropy weapons worked by speeding up time in a small area. They could make a planet age billions of years and hours, turning it into dust. But Morrison had discovered that the process could be run backwards. Instead of aging things to death, the same technology could make dead things young again. According to the report, Morrison had tested his theory on a small scale. He had taken a piece of rock that had been aged to dust by a Nexari weapon and restored it completely. Then he had tried it on a larger scale. He had brought an entire dead moon back to life. The report ended with a note that made Sarah's stomach drop. Recommend immediate implementation on galactic scale. We can restore every world the Nexari have destroyed. We can bring back every species they have made extinct. The damage they have done can be completely undone. Sarah stared at the screen. No wonder the Nexari had surrendered. They hadn't been beaten in battle. They had been faced with the possibility that all their conquests, all their destruction, could simply be erased. But there was more. Sarah found another file, this one from after the war. It was a council resolution titled, Restrictions on Temporal Manipulation Technology. The resolution banned any use of time-based weapons or defensive systems. It specifically mentioned entropy reversal technology and stated that any species found using such technology would be expelled from the Galactic Council. Sarah realized with growing horror that the ban wasn't just on the technology, it was on the thinking behind the technology. Humans hadn't just built a weapon. They had proved that permanent loss didn't have to be permanent. She found one more file, this one from Earth's own archives. It was a letter from the human representative to the Council, written just after the war ended. We understand the Council's concerns about our entropy reversal technology. We agree to restrict its use and to limit human involvement in future conflicts. However, we want it noted that we do not agree with the Council's reasoning. The ability to undo damage and restore what has been lost is not a threat to galactic stability. It is a gift that could benefit everyone. The human representative had been wrong, Sarah realized. It was exactly because the technology could benefit everyone that it was seen as a threat. Sarah's door chimed. Marcus walked in looking worried. Ambassador, you have a visitor. Council Prime Xerion is here to see you. Sarah quickly closed all the files on her screen. Send him in. Xerion entered her office, his silver leaves rustling softly. He looked around the small human space with interest. You have been researching, I see. How did you know? You accessed the restricted archives last night. We monitor such things. Xerion's leaves turned green, which meant he was being honest. Did you find what you were looking for? Sarah decided to be direct. I found out about the entropy reversal technology. I know why the Nexari surrendered. Xerion nodded slowly. And what do you think of what you learned? I think you banned humans not because we were too violent, but because we were too hopeful. Xerion's leaves turned bright yellow. He was surprised. Explain. Sarah stood up and walked to her window. Outside, she could see ships from the warring Zephyrian and crystalline fleets. They looked small and fragile against the stars. Every species in the galaxy has learned to accept that some things can't be fixed, she said. Dead worlds stay dead. Extinct species stay extinct. Some problems just don't have solutions, but humans refuse to accept that. And you think this is a good thing? Sarah turned back to face him. I think it's the most important thing. Because if you believe that problems can't be solved, you stop trying to solve them. Xerion was quiet for a long moment. His leaves slowly turned silver again. You understand now why we fear your species. Because we don't give up. Because you make others believe they don't have to give up either. Xerion moved closer to her window. The current war in the outer spiral is not really about mining rights, Ambassador Chen. What is it about? It is about 17 worlds that have been dead for over 1,000 years. Worlds that every species has accepted will always be dead. The Zephyrians and Crystallines are fighting over who gets to control the empty space around those worlds. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. But if humans got involved, those worlds could bloom with life again within a decade, Xerion finished. And then what happens to the careful balance of power that has kept the galaxy stable for centuries? What happens when scarcity becomes abundance? Sarah understood now. The galaxy wasn't just afraid of human technology. They were afraid of human thinking. They were afraid of what would happen if other species started believing that the impossible was just another problem waiting to be solved. "So what happens now?" she asked. Zerion's leaves turned deep blue. "Now, Ambassador Chen, you must decide whether to help us open a door that can never be closed again." Sarah spent the next 3 days in meetings with different council members. Each conversation revealed more pieces of the puzzle, and each piece made her more uncomfortable. The Altarian delegate, who looked like a walking tree with blue bark, explained the economic system. "The galaxy runs on careful resource management," she said in a voice like rustling leaves. "Every species has learned to live within their limits. Trade works because everyone accepts scarcity as natural." The Procyon representative, a being made of crystallized light, showed her star charts. "These are the dead zones," he said, pointing to areas marked in red. 17 sectors where nothing can live. Everyone knows to avoid them. The shipping routes, the trade agreements, the territorial boundaries, everything is built around these facts. But the most revealing conversation was with an elderly Centaurian named Voss. His species looked like humans, except their skin was silver and their eyes were completely black. Voss had been alive during the Void War. "I was there when your Dr. Morrison first demonstrated the entropy reversal," Voss told her. They were sitting in a quiet cafe on the station's observation deck. Through the window they could see the war fleets in the distance. It was the most beautiful and terrible thing I had ever seen. "Tell me what happened." Voss stirred his drink, which glowed faintly blue. "Morrison took us to a system that had been hit by Nexari weapons 10 years earlier. 4 planets all reduced to dust floating in space. We thought we were going to see a test on a small asteroid. But that's not what happened. Morrison activated his device and we watched 4 billion years of death reverse itself in 4 hours. The dust came together. The planets formed again. The oceans returned. And then..." Voss paused, his black eyes reflecting the starlight. "Then the life came back. Not new life. The same life that had been there before. The same trees, the same animals, the same people. Morrison had somehow recorded everything in the quantum structure of the dust and brought it all back exactly as it had been." Sarah felt cold. He brought back people? Dead people? Not zombies or ghosts. Real people, alive and healthy, with all their memories intact up to the moment of their death. They had no idea that 10 years had passed. To them, the Nexari attack had happened minutes ago. Sarah stared out at the stars. "That's impossible." That's what we all said. But there they were, 4 billion people who had been dead for 10 years, going about their lives as if nothing had happened. Voss leaned forward. "Do you understand what this means?" Sarah was beginning to. "It means death isn't permanent. It means nothing is permanent. Loss, extinction, destruction, all of it can be undone. Morrison proved that the universe keeps a record of everything that ever existed. And if you know how to read that record, you can bring anything back. So why didn't they use it? Why didn't they restore all the worlds the Nexari had destroyed?" Voss's expression grew sad. "Because the Council realized something terrifying. If death isn't permanent, then neither is any other form of control. Think about it. What gives governments power? What makes economic systems work? What keeps social order?" Sarah thought about it. The fear of loss. Exactly. People accept bad situations because they're afraid of losing what little they have. They work jobs they hate because they're afraid of losing their income. They follow laws they disagree with because they're afraid of losing their freedom. They accept wars because they're afraid of losing their way of life. But if you can bring back anything that's lost, then fear becomes meaningless. And without fear, the entire structure of galactic civilization collapses. Sarah understood now why the Council was so afraid. It wasn't just about technology or military power. It was about the very foundation of how society worked. After her meeting with Voss, Sarah returned to her office to find an urgent message waiting. It was from Earth. The message was short but clear. "Human fleet en route to your position. Admiral Santos commanding. Estimated arrival 18 hours. Sarah's hands shook as she read it. Admiral Maria Santos was Earth's most decorated military officer. She had fought in the border skirmishes with the Corvan pirates and had led the rescue mission when the Andorian colony was hit by that asteroid. If Earth was sending Santos, it meant they were taking the situation very seriously. Sarah sent an emergency message to the Council, informing them of the incoming human fleet. Within an hour, Zerion was at her door again. "How many ships?" he asked without greeting. I don't know. The message didn't say. Zerion's leaves turned red. This complicates things considerably. Why? You're the ones who asked for our help. We asked for your opinion. We have not yet decided whether to actually request human intervention. Before Sarah could respond, Marcus burst into the office. Ambassador, you need to see this. He activated the wall screen, which showed a news broadcast from the war zone. The reporter was a Zephyrian standing on what looked like a battlefield. Behind her, the landscape was covered with the twisted remains of spacecraft. The fighting has intensified dramatically in the past 24 hours, the reporter said. Both sides have begun using weapons banned by the Galactic Convention. Early reports suggest the use of quantum disruptors and bioweapons. The screen switched to show medical facilities overwhelmed with casualties. Sarah saw beings she couldn't identify, their bodies twisted by weapons designed to cause maximum suffering. The death toll now exceeds 50,000, with no end in sight. The reporter continued. Council peacekeepers have withdrawn from the combat zone, citing the deteriorating situation. Zerion made a sound like wind through dead leaves. It is getting worse faster than we anticipated. How long before the fighting spreads to other systems? Sarah asked. At this rate, perhaps a week. Sarah watched the news feed, feeling sick. And how long before the council makes a decision about human involvement? The debate could take months. Sarah stood up so quickly her chair fell over. You're going to let thousands more die while you debate whether to ask for help? Ambassador Chen, you must understand. No, I don't understand. Sarah's voice was louder than she had intended. People are dying right now. Real people with families and dreams and futures, and you're worried about what might happen to your power structures if we help them. Zerion's leaves turned deep purple, a color Sarah had never seen before. You prove our point with your reaction. Humans do not think about consequences. You see a problem and you want to fix it immediately without considering what your solution might break. And you see a problem and you want to study it to death while people suffer. The two stared at each other across the small office. Finally, Zerion spoke in a very quiet voice. The last time humans got involved in a galactic conflict, they didn't just end the war. They broke the fundamental rules of reality. They proved that the natural order could be overturned. Do you have any idea what that did to our civilization? You mean what it did to your control. I mean what it did to hope. Zerion's leaves turned silver. For 3 centuries we have struggled with the knowledge that death and loss are illusions. That suffering is a choice. That the limitations we have built our entire society around are artificial. Sarah stared at him. And that's a bad thing? It is a terrifying thing. Because once people know that their problems can be solved, they demand that they be solved, and not everyone in power wants that to happen. Before Sarah could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red and an automated voice announced, "Incoming fleet detected. All personnel to emergency stations." Through her window, Sarah could see new lights appearing in space. Ships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel, taking positions around the station. The human fleet had arrived early, and from the number of lights Sarah could count, Admiral Santos had brought a lot more than a small diplomatic escort. Admiral Maria Santos was not what Sarah had expected. She was a small woman with gray hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She looked more like someone's grandmother than Earth's most dangerous military officer. But when she walked into the council chambers, every alien present fell silent. Council Prime Zerion, Admiral Santos said, nodding respectfully. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Admiral Santos, Zerion replied, his leaves a careful neutral green. We were not expecting your arrival for several more hours. The situation in the outer spiral deteriorated faster than our projections indicated. We felt it was important to get here quickly. Santos gestured to the view screen which showed the ongoing battle. How many dead now? 73,000 confirmed, the Zephyrian delegate answered reluctantly. The number grows every hour. Santos was quiet for a moment, watching the display. And how long has the council been debating whether to ask for help? Admiral, Zerion began, you must understand that this decision affects more than just the current conflict. With respect, Council Prime, I understand perfectly. Santos turned to face the assembled aliens. You're not afraid of our weapons. You're afraid of our engineers. The chamber erupted in whispers and concerned sounds. Sarah noticed that several aliens were exchanging worried looks. Admiral Santos, the crystalline representative chimed, we fail to understand your meaning. Santos smiled, and for the first time, Sarah saw why other species might find humans frightening. The Admiral's smile was warm and kind, but it was also absolutely confident. "Let me tell you what my ships are carrying," Santos said. "We have 47 terraforming units, each capable of turning a dead world into a garden in 6 months. We have 12 entropy reversal generators, upgraded versions of Dr. Morrison's original design. We have 300 engineers who genuinely believe that every problem has a solution." She paused, letting that sink in. "And we have complete plans for turning the 17 dead worlds in the disputed zone into the most beautiful and productive planets in 3 sectors." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could see the fear in every alien face, but she could also see something else. In the younger delegates, in the junior staff members, in the beings who had grown up hearing stories about the dead worlds, she saw wonder. "That's impossible," the Zephyrian delegate said weakly. "Those worlds have been dead for over 1,000 years. The quantum decay alone would take our entropy reversal units about 6 weeks to fix," Santos interrupted gently. "We've run the calculations. We've tested the theory on smaller scales. It works." Sirion's leaves were cycling rapidly through different colors. "Admiral, even if your technology works as claimed, the implications. The implications are that 73,000 beings died for no reason." Santos's voice stayed calm, but Sarah could hear the steel underneath. "The implications are that you've been letting people fight over scraps when there could be abundance for everyone." "You don't understand," the elderly Centaurian delegate said urgently. "The galactic economy is built on resource scarcity. If you can simply create more resources whenever needed, then prices fall, wealth redistributes, and everyone's quality of life improves," Santos finished. "Yes, we understand economics too. But the power structures will adapt or become irrelevant." Santos looked around the chamber. "That's how progress works." The Procyon representative flickered with agitation. "Admiral, you speak of overturning millions of years of galactic civilization as if it were a simple matter. It is a simple matter. It's just not an easy one." Santos activated a holographic display that showed the disputed region. "Look at this objectively. 2 species are fighting over the right to control empty space around dead worlds. Meanwhile, my engineers could have those worlds blooming with life in less than a year." She manipulated the display, showing projections of what the restored worlds could look like. Sarah gasped at the beauty of it. Oceans and forests and cities, all where there was now only empty space and dust. The restored worlds could support 10 billion beings comfortably, Santos continued. They could produce enough food to end hunger in 3 sectors. They could mine enough rare elements to make faster than light, travel affordable for every species, and completely destabilize the galactic economy. The Altarian delegate protested. "Define destabilize," Santos challenged. "Do you mean make it impossible for a few species to maintain artificial scarcity for profit?" Sarah realized she was holding her breath. Santos wasn't just proposing to solve the current crisis. She was proposing to transform the entire galaxy. "Admiral," Zerion said carefully, "your proposals have merit, but surely you understand our concerns about the precedent this would set." "You mean the precedent that problems should be solved instead of managed?" "I mean the precedent that the natural order can be overturned at will." Santos was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer but somehow more powerful. "Council Prime, let me ask you something. How many beings in this galaxy go to bed hungry? How many die of diseases we know how to cure? How many live in poverty on dead worlds when we could restore those worlds to life?" Zerion's leaves turned blue. "The galaxy is a large place, Admiral. There will always be some level of suffering. Why?" The simple question hit the chamber like a physical blow. Sarah could see aliens looking at each other uncertainly. "Because," Zerion started, then stopped. "Because that is the nature of existence, says who? It is simply a fact. Resources are limited. Not every problem can be solved." Santos nodded slowly. "And there's the difference between human thinking and galactic thinking. You start with the assumption that problems can't be solved, so you focus on managing them. We start with the assumption that they can be solved, so we focus on solving them." "But Admiral," the crystalline delegate chimed urgently, "if people believe that all their problems can be solved, they will expect their leaders to solve them. The social contract that maintains order depends on people accepting certain limitations. Maybe it's time for a new social contract. Before anyone could respond, alerts began flashing on everyone's personal communicators. Marcus ran into the chamber, his face pale. Admiral Ambassador, you need to see this immediately. The main display switched to show the war zone. But something had changed. The fighting was intensifying, but it was also spreading. Ships from other species were joining the battle. The Corvan Confederacy has entered the conflict, Marcus reported breathlessly. They're claiming that the Zephyrians attacked one of their mining convoys. The Andromedans are mobilizing in response. Intelligence reports suggest 3 more species are preparing to join the fighting. Sarah felt sick. It's spreading. At this rate, Santos said grimly, we'll have a sector-wide war within days. Zerion's leaves were now flashing between red and black, colors that meant extreme distress. This is unprecedented. Wars do not spread this quickly unless someone wants them to spread, Santos finished. Admiral Chen, I think someone is deliberately escalating this conflict. But why? Santos looked around the chamber, studying the faces of the various delegates. Because they know that if humans get involved, we won't just stop the fighting. We'll solve the underlying problem, and there are beings in this galaxy who profit from problems not being solved. The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Someone was willing to let thousands die to prevent humans from demonstrating that scarcity was a choice. Council Prime, Santos said formally, on behalf of the human government, I am offering immediate assistance to end this conflict and restore the dead worlds. But we need your decision now. Every hour you delay costs lives. Zerion looked around the chamber at his fellow council members. Sarah could see the struggle in his expression. Fear warred with responsibility. Tradition fought with necessity. Admiral Santos, Zerion said finally, if we accept your help, if we lift the ban on human involvement in galactic conflicts, we can never go back. You understand this? I understand that you'll never have to go back. Because we're going to build something better. Sarah realized that this moment would change everything. Whatever happened next would echo through galactic history for centuries. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for the future humans wanted to build. The vote was closer than Sarah had expected. 43 species voted to lift the ban and accept human help. 37 voted against. 12 abstained. It was enough, but barely. Within hours, Admiral Santos had her fleet moving toward the war zone. But she didn't bring weapons. She brought something much more dangerous to the established order: solutions. Sarah watched from the command deck of the human flagship as they approached the first dead world. Through the viewport, it looked like nothing more than a gray ball of dust and rock floating in space. According to the records, it had once been called Verdania. 1 billion people had lived there before the Nexari weapons turned it to ash. Entropy reversal generators are online, reported Commander Kim, a young woman with bright eyes and steady hands. All readings are normal. Begin the process, Admiral Santos ordered. Sarah had read about entropy reversal, but seeing it happen was something entirely different. The generators sent out waves of energy that were invisible to the naked eye, but their effects were immediate and stunning. The dead world began to change. The gray dust started moving, swirling together in patterns that looked almost like a dance. As Sarah watched, the dust gathered into larger and larger chunks. Those chunks became rocks. The rocks came together to form the shape of continents. Temporal reversal is proceeding normally, Commander Kim reported. Estimated time to complete planetary restoration: 4 hours, 17 minutes. 4 hours to undo 1,000 years of death. Sarah could barely comprehend it. Admiral, came a voice from the communication station. We're getting signals from the war fleets. They've stopped fighting. Sarah looked at the tactical display. It was true. The Zephyrian and Crystalline fleets had ceased all hostilities and were moving to positions where they could observe the restoration process. They want to see if it actually works, Santos said with a slight smile. Over the next 4 hours, Sarah watched a miracle happen. Oceans formed on the dead world's surface. Clouds appeared in its atmosphere. Green began to spread across the continents as forests grew back exactly as they had been, and then the cities reappeared. It started with faint outlines in the restored landscapes. Then buildings rose from the ground like flowers blooming in fast motion. Roads connected settlements. Lights began to shine in windows. Admiral, Commander Kim said quietly, we're detecting life signs. How many? Over 800 million. Sarah felt tears running down her face. 800 million people who had been dead for 1,000 years were alive again. They would wake up thinking it was just another normal day with no idea that centuries had passed since their deaths. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the chief science officer. "Even with our technology bringing back this many people." "It's not our technology that brought them back," Santos said softly. "It's the universe's memory. We just reminded it what this place used to be." The communication system crackled to life. A voice came through, speaking an ancient language that the computer had to translate. "This is Verdania Traffic Control. Unknown ships, please identify yourselves and state your purpose in our system." Santos picked up the communicator. "Verdania Traffic Control. This is Admiral Santos of the Earth Fleet. We're here as part of a Galactic Council peacekeeping mission. Welcome back to the galaxy." There was a long pause. Then, "Admiral, our records show no species called humans in the Galactic Council, and our long-range sensors show significant changes in nearby star systems. How long have we been away?" Sarah could hear the growing concern in the voice. Santos handled it with remarkable gentleness. "About 1,000 years. I know that's hard to accept. We're transmitting historical data now. Take your time to review it. We'll be here to answer any questions." Another pause. "Admiral, are we the only ones? Are there other worlds like ours that have been restored?" Santos looked at the display showing the 16 other dead worlds in the system. "You're the first, but you won't be the last. Over the next 3 days, the human fleet restored all 17 worlds. Each one came back to life exactly as it had been. Billions of people who had been lost to the entropy. Weapons were alive again. The effect on the galaxy was immediate and profound. The war between the Zephyrians and Crystallines didn't just end, it became irrelevant. Why fight over dead space when that space was now filled with thriving worlds eager to trade and cooperate? But the changes went far beyond ending one conflict. News of the restoration spread throughout the galaxy at the speed of light. Within weeks, delegations from hundreds of species were arriving to see the miracle worlds for themselves. Sarah stood in her new office on Verdania, looking out at a city that hummed with life. In the distance, she could see ships from dozens of different species landing and taking off. The restored worlds had become the galaxy's new center of commerce and diplomacy. "Ambassador," Marcus said, entering with his daily reports. "You have a message from the Galactic Council. They want to establish a permanent embassy here." Sarah laughed. 6 months ago, the Council had been debating whether to let humans help with one small war. Now they wanted to be part of the new galactic order that humans had accidentally created. "Any word from Admiral Santos?" "She's at the Nexari homeworld. They've formally requested that she restore the worlds they destroyed during their Empire days. Apparently they want to make amends." Sarah shook her head in amazement. The Nexari, who had once terrified the galaxy with their entropy weapons, were now asking humans to undo the damage they had caused. It was a level of transformation she had never imagined possible. Her door chimed and Zirian entered. The old Council Prime looked tired but somehow lighter than before. His silver leaves had a new brightness to them. "Ambassador Chen," he said, "I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For being right." Zirian moved to the window and looked out at the bustling city. "I spent so long fearing what would happen if we changed. I forgot to consider what would happen if we didn't. And now? Now I see young beings from 100 different species working together on projects that were considered impossible just months ago. The galaxy is not falling apart as I feared. It is growing up." Sarah joined him at the window. "It wasn't just humans who made this happen. Every species in the galaxy had to choose to embrace change instead of fighting it. True, but it was humans who showed us that change was possible." Zirian paused. "There is something I must tell you. The ban on human involvement in galactic conflicts is being formally lifted. I figured as much. But more than that, the Council is proposing a new charter, one that makes solving problems the primary goal of galactic civilization, rather than managing them." Sarah turned to stare at him. "That's a complete reversal of everything the galaxy has believed for millions of years." "Yes, and it was inspired by watching human engineers turn 17 dead worlds into gardens in 1 week." Zirian's leaves turned a warm gold color that Sarah had learned meant happiness. "The formal proposal is called the Human Doctrine. What does it say? That any problem that can be solved should be solved. That scarcity is not a natural law but a failure of imagination. That the purpose of government is to expand possibilities, not limit them. Sarah felt a chill of excitement run down her spine. How many species support it? So far, 237. More join every day. Through the window, Sarah could see children playing in a park. Some were human, some were Zephyrian, some were species she didn't recognize. They were laughing and running together, creating games that mixed the traditions of dozens of different worlds. You know what the strangest part is? Sarah said. What? We weren't even trying to change the galaxy. We were just trying to help. Zerion made a sound that might have been laughter. Perhaps that is the most human thing of all. You solve problems not because you want power or glory, but because problems are meant to be solved. Sarah's communicator beeped with an incoming message. It was from Earth, marked with the highest priority codes. Ambassador Chen, the message read, "Congratulations on the success of the restoration project. Please prepare for the arrival of the first wave of human colonization and development teams. We're sending 10,000 engineers, 20,000 scientists, and 50,000 teachers. The galaxy is about to get a lot more interesting." President Martinez Serra showed the message to Zerion. His leaves cycled through several colors before settling on silver. 10,000 engineers, he murmured. The galaxy will never be the same. Is that a problem? Zerion looked out at the children playing in the park, at the ships from 100 different worlds landing peacefully side by side, at a city that had been dead for 1,000 years and was now more alive than ever. No, he said finally. I think it might be exactly what we needed. As the sun set over Verdania, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. 6 months ago, humans had been banned from galactic conflicts because they were supposedly too dangerous. Now they were being invited to transform the entire galaxy because they had proved that hope was more powerful than fear. The real reason humans had been banned wasn't their capacity for violence. It was their refusal to accept that violence was necessary. They had been feared not for their weapons but for their solutions, and now, for the first time in galactic history, solutions were winning.